the most powerful enemies.
Goku, whatever you've got planned, now's the time to spring it.
The strongest heroes. The biggest fights.
I'm Naruto Uzumaki, don't forget it!
All come together in one place. Hulu is the home to Naruto Shippuden, Bleach 1000-Year Blood War, Dragon Ball Z Kai, and more of your favorite anime. Find your anime on Hulu's Animehem, your anime destination.
Welcome to Dynamic Duos. I'm Tiffany Crivelli. On today's episode, Marc Bernardin and his fellow creator, Ariela Kristantina, take some time to talk and learn more about each other's nerddom journey. Marc and Ariela worked together in creating ComiXology's Adora and The Distance, and are behind a new series that will be making its debut in DSTLRY's anthology series, The Devil's Cut, as the short story, The Shepherd. Ariela is a talented artist whose work you may have seen in Insects from Aftershock or Deep State from Boom Studios. Marc is the writer behind Image Comics' Genius and ComiXology's Census. Beyond comics, he's written for many notable shows like Castle Rock, Masters of the Universe Revelations, and Star Trek Picard. Let's pass it over to Marc and Ariela as we get ready for another exciting and insightful episode of Dynamic Duos.
Hey Ariela, how are you?
Hi, I am great. How about you?
I'm doing really well. It's funny. I'm actually kind of glad that that CBR reached out and asked us to do this Dynamic Duos podcast, because the thing that I always bring to mind when talking about collaborators that I've worked with is that, and maybe this is not just a modern thing, but this is the history of comic book collaborations, unless you're literally sitting in the same office next to each other, is that I don't know an overwhelming amount about you personally. Like, I just know, I know that you're phenomenally, immensely, ridiculously talented.
Oh no.
and remain incredibly lucky that that you've not just worked with me once, but now twice. But also I just, hey, how are you? What's going on in your world? Like, okay, I'll tell you this. Mm-hmm. As a person of color of a certain age, when I told my parents that I wanted to write for a living, and they were like, "Write what?" I was like, science fiction, maybe fantasy, comic books, movies and TV. Ooh. There was that pause of is that a career people actually have? Is that a thing you think you can do and make a living at? We don't know anybody else who does that. Why would you think that you could do that? What was your parents' response when you were like, I would like to draw?
Well, this is interesting because I think we'll have a lot of similarities, even though we have a very little age gap. Just because, my mom used to yell at me if she saw me scribbling on my notebook, because on the side of my notebook will be a lot of scribbles. What are you going to do? Are you going to draw portraits and festivals? Is that what you're going to do with your life? Because that's basically it. So they never, send me to any kind of art school, art courses, or painting courses. I don't know how to draw formally until I got, maybe 22 years old. When my mom practically gave up, I was like, all right, fine. You got your undergrad, you got your degree, you do whatever it is you want with your life. But of all this time, she's finally okay with that. My dad is very supportive, but didn't really, I think, confront my mom in a way too much, as most dads won't. I think so. Now that I'm older and wiser.
Was there anybody artistic in your family? Was there anybody that you could at least kind of say, oh, I think I get it from cousin Ernie, or I think it comes down from my mom's side. Her grandmother loved to sketch, or whatever that was.
It's funny thing because my dad actually likes to draw, but not really pursuing it. He likes to draw this in a style called wayang. Mm-hmm. Wayang is a traditional art from Indonesia. So it has a certain style, and approach, but he didn't really pursue it. And I know one of my uncles from my dad's side painted as a hobby. But that's all I know because my father is a pharmacist and my mom is actually a chemist. So yeah, and my undergrad degree is like computer language, just like, computer stuff.
Wow. I love the, like, all right, you do this for me, get this degree that I'm sure you can get a decent job at, and then try to do the other thing.
Yeah.
It's the Jim Lee story. Like, I remember hearing that from Jim, was like, I was supposed to be a doctor. And, I pre-med and I studied, and then I said, listen, I'm going to take a year and try to make this comic thing work. And that entire year, his parents are like, what are you wasting your time for? Go be a doctor.
Did you study something else before you actually write something, or are you just like, I don't care, I'm gonna write anyway? Like,
no, it's funny because when I first went to university, I was getting a business degree, but I'm historically bad at math. Like, math is my weakness. Math is my, like, numbers. I don't know what we're doing here, you guys. I can't help you at all. If it's not addition or subtraction or multiplication, I can't help you. Division, even just straight up division, is a little bit out of my depth. And so I was going to get this business degree. And so I was in university for all of one semester, and my grades were like D's and like C minus, like about as bad as you could do and not get kicked out of college. And then I told my dad, it's like, Dad, I just can't. Like, I just can't. I tried, because my father's an accountant. And so for him, numbers are the way that he sees the world. Like, numbers, and English is not his first language. He grew up in Haiti. And so, like, he had to learn English first. Like, he had French and Creole, went to London to learn English, and then came to New York to make his way in the world. And so numbers was always the thing that allowed him to transit the language barrier. Numbers were always numbers. Numbers never lied. Everybody speaks numbers. I didn't. I did not speak number at all.
Your dad must be very confused.
Absolutely. Although, like, and the thing about my dad as an immigrant was he very much invested himself in the joys of America, in the upper, like, he loved going to the movies. He loved watching TV. He loved sports. He just wanted to immerse himself in the culture, which is why I got that, right? Like, he's like, let's take the boy to the movies. We'll do this. We'll watch Star Trek on TV. I'm really about this $6 Million Man thing. Like, he swam in it, because I think for him, that was the, like, getting to understand what it means to be an American is, here's what Americans like. Here's what they do. Here are their pastimes and their hobbies. And so my love for movies and comic books comes from my dad, because I remember he would, like, come home from work with a little, like, brown paper bag that had comics in it. And he's like, I think the boy might like these. And they were not comics I should have read. Like, these were like Conan the Barbarian, like violence and bloodshed and nudity and sex. But he didn't read past the cover, so he just didn't know it was a thing that a 10-year-old boy shouldn't be reading. It's like, these are great, Dad. You gotta bring me home more of these. What was your first exposure to I guess mainstream comics?
Well, manga was very popular back in the 90s. Very popular. It's like 90% of the market will be manga. There were some American comics, but one, they're like super expensive. Two, they're way too thin. Like, three, I'm not gonna wait a whole month to read and invest in this thing that I can't really like. Manga is my first getaway to comics. I love to read back then. Like, I read everything that is printed. So my father and my mom also, they just bought me anything that they can grab their hands on. And then comics are cheap. Manga were cheap back then. It's still cheap today too. So my first comic is, I remember it was called Captain Kidd by Yuho Ashibe. It's about a pirate that works with a mermaid, something. Like, this is a whole bunch of pirate thing before One Piece got very popular, of course. But the thing with Japanese manga in Indonesia at that time is, like, if it's published, it's translated into Indonesian too, if it's published in the 90s, they probably bought the right from something that is like 15 years old. So we're always behind. So that manga is usually published first in Japan in the 80s or like late 70s. So the style is always like out of date. Kind of thing. So it's kind of weird when I said things like that. And like if I met somebody from Japan, if I meet somebody from Japan, it's like, I like this comic. It's like, how old are you? It's like, I'm sorry.
I'm 73 years old.
Apparently, I have an old soul. How about you? What's your first comic that you will never ever forget, aside from Conan the Barbarian? Apparently.
Aside from Savage Sword of Conan, it was the one that I think turned me into a reader, because I think Savage Sword was a very specific thing, but it was the Secret Wars, Marvel Secret Wars, which was designed to be an entry point, right? Like, here's 12 issues, every comic book character in the Marvel universe, all in this one 12-issue story. And so it was hey, do you not know anything about these characters? Here's like the sample platter. Here are the X-Men, here's Spider-Man, here's, Punisher, here's the Hulk, here's the Avengers. If you know nothing about them, we will tell you in a 12-issue series. And it did its job, which is I suddenly became a Marvel Comics fan. And specifically because I grew up in New York, and the Marvel universe is set in New York. And so, like, getting to the weirdness of being like 11 or 12 years old and going into Manhattan, which I would do fairly regularly, and being like, oh, the Baxter Building is right here. Dr. Strange's office is right here. Like, I have the address. I could walk by if I want to. And like the Daily Bugle building is right there. And I mean, they weren't there. But that feeling that you were in some way connected to that world, that it wasn't quite as fictional as it felt in the DC universe. Because it's like, oh, Metropolis, I get it's supposed to be New York, but also so is Gotham, which is just supposed to be the shitty parts of New York. And I don't really know where like Coast City is or Star City, like any of these other things. Like, they just feel like they just made up city names. Whereas New York was New York. Like, Spider-Man's from Queens. Like, all of those things kind of worked for me. And then I started like very gently getting into manga, and mostly because I think it was First Comics began reprinting Lone Wolf and Cub, for American audiences. And they had these awesome Frank Miller covers. I think he did the covers for the first like 24 issues.
He did,
and I was a big Frank Miller fan. And so that was my like, oh, this looks cool. I like this dude's art. And what is this story? This story is bananas. I love every minute of it. And that was my first like manga exposure. And then that led me to like Akira. And then like I never went deep because there's so much of it. But it was like, oh, I'm on board for this. Fist of the North Star. This is kind of dope. Golgo 13. This is kind of great. Like, there's the sort of the big booms of manga that made it to the West were the ones that I kind of dug into.
Sweet. Talking about covers, when you mentioned about Frank Miller, it's one of the things that I got really confused about American comics in the first place. That's why I never really got into them. I'm not going to say what comic it was because it's going to show who's the interior artist and who's the cover artist. But like there's this store that got out of business. So they discounted, they put everything on sale, including American comic book. So I picked up one. Oh my God, the cover is so great. And I start flipping inside, like, what happened? Do they have a stroke? Like, why is it so different? Like,
yeah.
So I was like, I'm not interested in this. I'm interested in the cover. So I remember I was just like, I'm not buying it. So because I bought 2 or 3, like right in the middle. I don't know which one belonged to what. I don't know. I just pick up the cover that I like and I flipped it over. It's like, this is not what I was promised.
Yeah, comics, especially in like the 90s, were like awful with that. Of the like, this is a Mobius cover. Did Mobius do all the art inside? No, he did not. No, they paid him like $30,000 to do one illustration, which is the cover, and the inside is something completely different.
Yeah, because like manga doesn't really do that, right? Like whatever you got on the cover is what you get in the inside. So like even like back in the 90s, the cover was not really flashy, it's not really great. Like if you look at the covers, like they're okay. They're not designed for you to be like to grab it immediately, because what you do is just like you flip it over, you read the synopsis, like, oh, I'm going with this, because you know exactly the inside is gonna look like the outside. Oh my god!
I know. And so how do you go from Jakarta, from Indonesia, to SCAD? How does that jump happen? And explain to people what SCAD is if they don't know what SCAD is.
SCAD is Savannah College of Art and Design. Back in 2005, I think I heard one of my colleagues in Indonesia. His name is Chris Lee. He's probably the first person that I know that went to SCAD, that I know personally. Like, oh, he went on like discussion or panels or like art festivals talking about like his experience there. So back in 2010, I think, I remember like, I never had my formal education in art, so I'm just going to apply to whatever this SCAD is. So I just blindly I find the website. I remember briefly Googled about Savannah. Oh, it's quite a nice town. Well, I think I could live there, So I just sent my application without telling my parents. And then I got the reply back telling me that I got like a partial scholarship, blah, 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 if I am interested. And then I told my dad, and then my mom, like 2 months after I told my dad, I was like, that's a hell just broke loose. And then she stopped talking to me for like 3 months straight.
Oh, no.
And then, but she kept taking me to this like shopping spree for like, let's buy these suitcases, let's buy those jackets because it's gonna be cold in there. No, it's not really. But
it's the South of America. It's not cold there much.
It's probably gonna be snow. Let's grab these boots. But she's not. She's doing it without actually talking to me, like just drag me along, like being a mom, But then eventually I went there. And also I felt stuck as a manga artist. Like I feel like I'm not going anywhere. I feel very convenient at that time. I had my studio. I got several exhibitions on galleries. Like I got road trip with galleries, blah, blah, blah. All my books were published and put in mainstream bookstores. So I feel like I'm there, but not really, as like a person, as an artist. So like, let's just go somewhere where I have to start over from zero. And I just changed my style completely, because what is the opposite of manga? Like in my very small mind, I was like, superhero, let's do that. So all my portfolio in SCAD was superhero.
What were you doing when we first connected? Well, the first time we tried to connect was on Genius for Top Cow.
Yes.
And I think that schedules just didn't come together. You were busy being a fabulous, internationally famous artist.
Well, I think I was doing Insect or Rebels right after Insect ending. But also I have to tell you, I've never talked about this with anybody before. When I heard your name and I Googled, it's like, ooh, kind of scary, even because you have like a very long credits, after your name. By that time, I was like, oh, he's famous. And at that time, I remember there was like, shootings, police brutality was very, very much hurt everywhere. And I read Genius because I think your editor sent it to me. Mm-hmm. So there was some kind of like, aside from the schedule didn't match, I have to say, like, thankfully. But like, I remember telling your editors, like, I don't think I'm the right person for this, because I don't know the struggle. I don't know if I can draw it right, because this seems also kind of personal to you. Like every time I work with you, I think it always as hard as it is personal. But this is some world that I don't know. Like I read about it, I watched TV about it, but like, what if I visualize it wrong? Like I don't. There's that hesitation in me to say yes, even if the schedule matches.
I mean, that's 100% fair, because I've similarly turned down opportunities because like I don't know if I could write that. I don't know if I can get in that headspace. Like I don't know if, or I don't know if that's a thing I want to be doing. It could be
Mm-hmm.
great on the other side of it. Just I don't know if it's, there was just one show that this one TV show that I was up for that I think they might have offered me a job, but it ended up being like this, just kind of misogynist, brutal for the sake of brutal towards its female protagonists. And it was a revenge thing, and so like I get it's got to be hard on the front end so that she can earn having her revenge on the other side. But I was like, I don't even want to get in the headspace of the front end of that. Like, I just don't want to do that. And so I 100% respect the person saying like, listen, I'm not sure that I want to get in the place that I need to get into to do this, and I'm not sure that I authentically can bring myself there for whatever reason. If the person's like can't do it, won't do it, then understand. But that was the first time our paths kind of glanced. And it happened just because I'm like, I saw your art on the internet and I think you're amazing. Would you like to do my comic book?
Internet is great.
Internet is awesome. And then the second time was for Adora when it finally, everything kind of clicked. Unless there's a second time that I forgot where we almost worked together.
Well, Genius, I mean, your editor came to me once and then you contacted me the second time, I think.
Yeah.
Twice, I think, for Genius.
Right.
But yeah, again, like the schedule just was not right.
And so then Adora happened, and it was a wonderful experience for all parties concerned, I think, anyway. But, we've talked at length, both, personally and then on panels and whatever, about the fact that, that a script for a book is not even a book. Really, it's just a kind of blueprint that somebody else will come in and invest with. They'll do all of the architecture. They'll do all of the spackling. They'll put all the walls up. They'll make it all nicey nice. And by doing so, they take a thing that was not a functional story and make it, emotional and make it real and make it lived in. And like all of that work that you did to make that world feel like a real world and not just a sketch on a paper, like is 100%, I think the reason why people respond to that book is because of the way it looks and because of the emotion and because of the acting on the faces and because of the vistas and all of that stuff. It would not be the same book if it had been anybody else but you. And so I remain eternally grateful for you saying like, yeah, I can find a year to do this book.
Oh, well, but yeah, I mean, Adora is very, very special, I think. Like I said, like your story always has heart, always feels very personal. So I think it's it's quote unquote easy for me to like, oh yeah, I can sort of like, I hope I can portray what you want, onto the papers, because it still has to look like yours as much as mine, if you get what I mean. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that story is really special. I think I really like it.
The thing that
I know you told the story like a million times about Adora, like how personal it is for you. When you wrote it, did you write it like parts by parts, or you go back to it and then you come back to it the other year? Because I know you said something like you finished the story for like 12 years, like a decade. Like, did you go back and forth to fix things, and how did it go?
Yeah, for a decent chunk of those, I think it was like 13 to 14 active years of development. And I think for a decent chunk of that, it was just like first the idea came and it was just a one-page kind of pitch sheet. Like, here's the thing, it was Adoring the Big Nothing was the first title for it. Adoring the Big Nothing. Felt very much like a kid's book. And I think I just wrote a page on it with just some like loose ideas of stuff, and then kind of fleshed it out into like a 10-page document. If you were going to, pitch it to a real publisher, they would want something that felt a little bit more robust. So it had all the characters in it. And I think I shared that document with you at some point. And then it was like, what was it, like 5 years ago? I was in between TV shows, and I had like a month and a half where I didn't have anything to write. I didn't have any obligations. I'm like, I'm going to write a Dora now. I know I'm going to have to. I mean, I want to. At some point, we'll find a publisher for it. And I hadn't even spoken to Chip or David about it yet. It was just, I'm going to write this because I know I'm going to have to write this, and I've got a window of opportunity, so I'm just going to do it. And then that just took a month or so of just like blazing through it. Like I kind of knew what the story was.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But there wasn't a ton of kind of back and forth. It was a lot of marination, right? Like the idea would come and then sit in my brain and then just start to kind of work in the background, and then an idea would happen and I'd jot it down, and then it would still work in the background. And then when I sat down to write it, it just became all of that stuff that had been kind of happening in the system, in the operating software of my mind. And then was just like, all right, now's the time to do it. And then it all just kind of happened. And then once Chip Mosher and David Steinberger came involved at ComiXology Originals, and once Will Dennis came aboard, they had some thoughts, none of which were like catastrophic or even very invasive, but it's just like, what if it was this? What if it was that? What if it was a little bit longer? We like it to be longer. Can you make it longer? I was like, no, it is what it is. And then when Chip and David, pulled me aside at Thought Bubble like 2 years ago and were like, hey, we're doing a new comic book thing. We don't like vowels very much, so we're going to call it DSTLRY, but just with no vowels. We're like, do you want to do a book? And I was like, I was like, yeah, guys, like Adora turned out really well. I really liked working with you. I mean, I like vowels personally. I like all the letters.
Yes, please.
Yeah, but if you guys have a hard stance against vowels, then, hey, it's your company. That's fine. And they were like, well, what do you want to do? And I pitched them like 5 or 6 different things. And this Shepherd was the one that they sort of dug the most. And immediately after doing that, I was like, hey, I wonder if Ariela's free. Like, I think Ariela would be great on this. It's like, what's your schedule? They're like, she's busy. You can't have her.
You can. No, I am not busy.
She's got 19 books she's doing. She can't do it.
So, Shepherd, what do you have in store for me without giving any spoilers?
I think the thing that I remember, Will Dennis, when he first read the kind of pitch for it, he's like, oh, I get it. It's like Iron Giant meets Goonies.
Ooh.
And I was like, well, not so much the Goonies, but it's like, and even though I'm like an 80s kid, like I grew up in the 80s, I don't have a lot of fondness for Goonies. So sorry out there, Goonies Never Die Nation, but it's just not my jam. Iron Giant, however, is 100% my jam. Like Iron Giant is a masterpiece. And so if we can kind of even get close to that feeling of a robot, an android, a protector whose programming starts to glitch just enough that makes them begin to feel and seem human. And then the desire to protect, the desire to care for, the desire to shield, to shepherd, anybody leads her to interact with these 3 knuckleheads who are kind of orphans on a giant space station who basically need somebody to care for them, need somebody to protect them, need somebody who can help them be the found family that they kind of already are, but the best version of that. Kind of it's a story about longing and connection of people who've always wanted somebody to look out for them, and then somebody who's always wanted to look out for somebody, and then how those 2 disparate like units begin to mesh and collide, and then bad things happen. Because if bad things don't happen, then we're kind of doing the story wrong.
That's true.
It's true. And so like giant science fiction, big fights and robots and laser beams and spaceships, but woohoo! But also, kids just trying to be kids, who've been forced to grow up faster than they should have, who are just trying to find, a place where they belong and people they belong with, and then how that relationship begins to strengthen and grow over time. And so it's a lot of those things, but it's also like, hey, I bet you Ariela would have a blast. Like, this is the most manga thing I've ever written. It's like, ooh.
I cannot wait. Because like before, like Adora works with like adults, but now they're like this three
Yeah,
little kids having fun.
having
So
fun
with a robot.
with a robot, with a sexy lady robot who's not that sexy lady robot, but still, yay! And and this is honestly one of the few things that I've written where I don't have a full script going into the creative process. I mean, Adora, like we just sent you a script, like here's the book. And
Right,
so
right.
it'll be I'm really looking forward to this version of collaboration where it's like, all right, like let's start from the very beginning. Like right now, there's a page
Uh,
document of what it is, and let's kind of build this together. And what should this look like? How should this feel like? What do you want to draw? What would you rather not draw? Like I'm really, really looking forward to kind of getting under the hood from the beginning and saying, all right,
yeah.
let's go. Let's make a comic book as opposed to I wrote a thing. Do you want to draw
Who's
that?
drawing?
Please draw it. Please make it better with art things.
Yeah, I can't wait. I love that our process kind of different for this one. It seems appropriate.
Mhm. And I think that with any, hopefully, in that kind of ongoing long-term collaboration, finding different ways to do it, just finding new ways into the work, finding new ways to work together is what helps to keep that relationship alive. Where, because if it keeps any
Yeah.
relationship alive. It's the same thing every day, all day. Then it's like, oh well, whatever. We'll just do this again.
I think it will
Page
be us in the next 10 years. I
I
don't know.
know. It's like page 400 of this garbage.
You again.
You again. Fine. But if you can keep it fresh, if you can keep it sort of
Yeah.
evolving and changing, then hopefully neither of us will get bored with each other, and then we can keep making comic books for a while.
Hey.
Yay! What else do you have coming out? Because, like, listen, the Devil's Cut, the sort of the short story we did, 5 pages. We packed quite a bit into 5 pages. Um, but Devil's Cut is already out. Shepherd, the full book probably won't hit stands, if I had to guess, until like mid-late 24,
Yeah.
on the earliest. But what else? What else do you have coming? The comic book readers and purchasers can get their hands on between now and then.
I think I should have this book coming out from ComiXology. The title is The Girl Who Draws on Whales.
Mm.
So that is going to be another fantasy, young adult stuff. It's going to be exciting. I'm just bad at pitches and telling people the synopsis, so I'd rather not.
I'll say that, like, she showed me some artwork when we were signing at the distillery booth at San Diego Comic-Con. We were like, have you seen the whale book? It was like, no. And so she pulled up her phone. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. You should sell this right away. So I think, like, when you hear about the girl who draws on whales, then go out and buy The Girl Who Draws on Whales.
Oh, and I know your new book just came out, right? The Muhammad Ali one.
Yeah, the Messenger that I did with Ron Salas.
Yes.
It's out. I'm not sure when this podcast will drop, but it's August 15th is the publication date. And so very excited. That is also apparently I only do comic books that take 10 years to make.
Well, not with Shepherd though. Not with Shepherd.
No, Shepherd will be on the fast track, but by and large, I'm a decade by decade creator. So, but yeah, Messenger, the Ali book, took a long time also, but that finally is out. And then my second ComiXology book, a book called Census, is going to hit print from Dark Horse in January, I think. And yeah, and then there's some other things that I can't talk about because of the reasons that we can't talk about things. It is not my place to announce things that I cannot announce.
I understood.
People will be angry with me if I just like start breaking
email.
news. Yeah, like, what are you doing? We had a whole PR plan. Like, sorry, I was on a podcast.
I love that the podcast will be like a lot of beep, 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 just like all sensors.
Yeah. How did they come in here and beep half this podcast? It's like, I'm sorry, CBR. I didn't mean to screw up your whole jam here. Well, I had such a blast doing this because every time I see you, and it's not every time because it's only like once a year at a comic
Yes,
book
I've been
convention.
so sad.
I know. I always have the best time because you're always so wonderful and cool and fun to hang out with. And so to get to like peel the layers and go behind the curtain of some of the things that makes Ariela is a treat.
Oh, it's always nice talking to you too. I am
Yeah.
not really good at talking unless I am half drunk in all of the conventions as usual. I meet for like 5 seconds and then I'm gone. I gotta go up. I need to sleep at like 11 p.m.
I
But
know. Like most of my
you
interactions
are,
with Ariel at a convention are like signing for an hour or like glancing blows in the gas lamp as you're going from one bar to another with Jock. It's almost always Jock
or Will Dennis,
or
whichever
Will
that
Dennis.
like
Yeah,
gonna buy me some drink. Like,
the grand
go
old
get some
men
drink.
of comics. Like we're going to the artist bar over here. Okay, so
I'm
it's
gonna follow
Ariella.
them.
But no, this was lovely. This is a great way for me to wake up and for you to go to sleep because you're 12 hours
Ah,
ahead of me or behind me. I
no,
don't know how that works.
my day's just started. Don't worry.
Your day has just started. Wow. Okay. Well, because you're a vampire, so you're just working at night now.
Don't tell anybody yet.
Fair enough. It looks sunny wherever you are. All right,
Well,
Ariella.
thank
You
you,
have yourself a
Mark.
good day
You too.
and talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
I want to say thank you to Ariela and Marc for this fantastic episode. DSTLRY's debut anthology featuring Marc and Ariela's story, The Shepherd, goes on sale on August 30th. And as always, thank you so much for listening. If you liked this episode, share it with a friend, and we'll see you next time on Dynamic Duos.